Alright, so I've made a new file. Here I can even, yeah, all it is I made a file called PT recreation PC. That's it. And there's nothing in it. I've made what I've always told you to do. Made an art folder. Inside the art folder, we've made a materials and a textures. We're going to get into prefabs and things like that today, but we're not going to get into too deep. So for that reason, we're just going to import everything in this way, and then we're going to make a new folder called prefabs, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So easiest way to import is I could right click in here and say import in new asset if I want, or the way I like to do stuff is open up the folder that I just went to and just grab everything and throw it in that environment folder. And we'll just throw them in there. Okay. Another thing that I usually have you do is come in here and replace these generic textures and stuff, but we aren't going to do that at this point. We're just going to leave them generic because I just want to build the room, and then we're going to talk about textures in a week or two. You should have these unwrapped and everything. They should just be fine. Lighting this room without textures and stuff is only going to make it more controllable of what you're expecting to see. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab this floor layout. I'm going to throw it in here, and it should be, and normally it's at 90-degree angle. Oops. I have to get used to my fingers here. Okay, so here's our wall. Here's our ground plane. I'm going to take this one and turn it down 0.5 there. Something a little bit better. And I'm going to, let's turn it off. Just going to move it up here in the sky because it's directional. Just get it out of the way. Okay, so here we are. Inside of Unity, if you don't remember, it's the middle mouse button to pan, the right mouse button to rotate, and the left mouse button to select things. You can also zoom in with your middle mouse button if you want, or you can hold Alt Control and pull in and out with your right to zoom in and out. You can also, hold on here, I think it's, yeah. You can also move back and forth, which is the way you would in a game, with the WASD keys, which is WS for backwards, A for the right, and D for the left. It's just this system right here. It's a gameplay. It's the standard game keyboards. Okay. So this is actually a better way to move around in a lot of cases, and you should get used to doing this, because if you move the camera by zooming in and out, you're actually changing the way the camera sees the world. But anyway, so we've got our first piece in here, and at this point, let's talk about bringing stuff in. So first thing I'm going to do is, just to make our lives easier, is I'm going to bring in a floor piece. I'm going to throw this floor down here. And by default, it should line up with this first floor, and you can see that it does. Everything looks good, and it's all good. Now, what I want to do is the next step, but let's talk about what we've talked about a little bit. So there's a thing in game engines, they're called, and we've seen them at Max a little bit, they're called instances. And in Unity, they're called prefabs. What prefabs are the master objects that you're going to duplicate throughout. That way you can change one of the objects, but affect all of them across the board. And you can make variations, and you can make subsets, and you can do all this kind of cool stuff. They've made it a lot easier in the latest versions of Unity that we're using than they used to be, but there's still some things that we have to understand. So we're going to use that, and we're going to try and use that to get that grime and stuff on there. We're going to have variations and things like that, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. So for now, well, let's talk about how we're going to make a prefab. How do you make a prefab? A prefab, again, is just the word for instance. What a lot of artists and what a lot of people like to do is have an environment where your models and textures and everything are in one place, and then always have a separate place, whether it's in the arts or not. We're going to leave it in arts because that's where we are. We're going to say create folder, and we're going to call it prefabs, Prefabs. And then we're going to open that up, and then we're going to just take this floor 01, and drag it into here. And it comes up with this option: do you want an original prefab or a prefab variant? Now, obviously, we don't have any prefabs yet, so we're going to say original prefab. And now we have this original prefab. And if we look up here, it looks a little bit different. So if I came back out and came to the environment and I dragged this floor on here again, you see how it has this little paper on it? That means it's the original mesh. It has the mesh info like inside of here. What a prefab does, it looks a little different though. It doesn't have that in there anymore, and it's got this little arrow over to the side. What you're able to do with a prefab is come in and edit it specifically on its own, and you can do that either inside of the project window, which isn't in the game, and when you do it in here, for sure it changes everything that's using it, or you could do it in here and push this button. It'll open up the actual connection to here. So let's do that real quick. I'm going to open it up and you'll see everything's gone except for my ground plane here. So what's going on? I'm now working inside of this specific prefab. So what does that mean? It means that I've anything I do to this prefab, so if I decide I want to shrink it, say 0.5 for whatever reason, and then I come back out, you'll see that autosave is on. You can do it by default, but autosave is usually the way we do it now. And then you come back out and now our wall's smaller. It goes even deeper than that. I'm going to copy this over, Control C, Control V, copy it and put it over here. And what we'll get, is if I come back into this prefab and I change it back to 1, and then I go back out so it's full size. If I go back out, you'll see both of them are now full size. Okay. Believe it or not, that's a really important, cool thing that we use for building our worlds. But what we're going to end up doing is making prefabs of certain sections of walls. We don't have a really big area, but I just want to get you used to it. So like this wall, we can count how many we have. Like 1, 2, 3, 4. I think there's 4. But if we just, instead of saying one wall segment is how we build everything, we're going to say 2. That's something we could do. So the deal is that the floor's here, and we've got this prefab now. What now? Well, one of the things I probably shouldn't have done is named it 01. I'm so old school. But it just means that when you duplicate something, it's going to be 01, 02, 03. So this gets really messy really fast, if you noticed. One of the things you can do is you can open up and create what's called an empty, and it's just a game object. It's kind of like a folder, and so we're going to name this floors. We're going to drag these two objects into here.